What happens when a man comes out of a coma and discovers that his wife has disappeared along with his money, his house, and even his name? He should have broken down, but he chose something else. What happened next left everyone speechless. My name is Garrett, and I'll tell you this. If one day you wake up in the ICU with a tube down your throat and the first thing you see is a ceiling the color of dried milk, don't panic. Panicking is useless. The wife won't pick up the phone anyway. When I came to after my heart attack, I didn't feel pain. I felt empty. The kind of deafening, ringing emptiness that usually comes not with medication, but with news that no one dares to voice out loud. Now let's back up a little bit. The day I was seized, as the ER reports now put it, was ordinary, disgustingly ordinary. I took the day off to go grocery shopping because Laura, my wife, was getting migraines. And as usual, I was doing my best to make things easier for her at home. Imagine, 7 a.m., freezing cold, I'm standing in line for her favorite Greek yogurt with figs, which by the way is only sold in one store in the city limits. So I return, lugging 2 heavy bags into the house, and on the third step I suddenly fall into darkness. The next thing I remember is an oxygen mask, flashes of light, voices above my head, the smell of plastic and someone else's gloves, and then silence. 2.5 days in a coma. My heart went into overdrive, my lungs were leaking, my blood pressure was racing like an electric car. The doctor said, "A couple more hours and you'd be a new name in statistics." That was lucky. On the third day, I opened my eyes. First thing I saw were my fingers, moving, then my neck. Same thing. That's okay. So he's alive. Where's the wife? I pressed the call button. The nurse came in, cute, sneakers, ponytail. I asked about Laura. She shrugged. No one came. But we've notified the emergency contacts. Uh-huh. So we did. And Laura didn't show up. Didn't even call. No flower, no card, no. Hey, are you still there? Or are you fucking angels already? Pardon my language. No, I'm not. 'Cause you know what's worse than the pain? A blank phone screen. Especially when you're not just lying in a room, but you've just walked through the gates of hell with, "Welcome back, sir." When I finally got my phone back, I saw 3 things. A notification that $4,980 had been debited from our joint account. A notification of a reservation at the Jamaica Bay Resort. And a message from Laura, "This is all your fault. I can't do this anymore. Don't come looking for me. Not even get well. Not I'm leaving. It's just like that, dry, businesslike. Like we're getting divorced by the microwave manual." I tried calling several times. It kept ringing, but nothing. Then unavailable. Then she deleted me from all chat rooms. Even Spotify wouldn't share our playlists anymore. The banking app was happy too. Total account, zeroed out, transferred. To where? Who knows, probably a daiquiri by the pool. So there I lay, hooked up to an IV, in a room where the only thing breathing is a heart rate monitor. And I realized I wasn't just alone. I'm left with no money, no wife, no home, and Manon, most frustratingly, no sense that anyone cares at all. You know what the ironic thing is? I've always been the keeper type, the one who works without sick days, who pays the mortgage, who fixes the sink even though the damn siphon leaks every week. I'm the one who doesn't whine. Now I'm a statistic, just another man who got dumped when he became inconvenient. And you know I'd understand if we were fighting, if I was an asshole. But I didn't drink, I didn't hit, I didn't go out. I just snapped one day. When you can't get out of bed and your wife leaves with your money to sunbathe in a deluxe suite, you suddenly realize, damn it, life isn't about fairness. It's about who gets there first. I asked the nurse to remove the bracelet Laura had given me for my anniversary. It was metal, engraved, Forever L. Oh well, forever ended in the emergency room. The plastic bucket next to my bed was the perfect place to end this romance. I was moved to a regular room. The doctor said I'd be discharged in a week. That's great, except I have nowhere to go. The house is sold. My bank account's empty. My family's all gone. And my wife is swimming in the tropics and probably Instagramming with a cocktail in her hand. Then a man in his 60s with an amputated leg was moved into the ward. He acted like he'd just won the Olympics. He told how he had gone to the store to buy milk, fell down, and now he was without a foot, but without his wife. She, brother, as soon as she found out, packed a suitcase. She says I'm a reminder of her old age. We both laughed. Then we both fell silent. Laughter, comes from anger. I lay there thinking, good, that's good. New level. Welcome to the game called All Over Again, only on a dead heart and no support. On the fifth day, a man in a suit showed up in the room. Turned out to be from social services, asked if I had anyone to call. I gave my brother's number, the only one who probably wouldn't send, then asked if I could stay a couple more days. He looked at the list and said, till Tuesday at the most. Then the ward is needed by others. I asked if I could get a printout on my insurance. He nodded and left, and I was left, in the same pajamas, with the same thoughts. An empty wallet, an empty house, empty life, and the cherry on the cake, an empty look in the mirror. Because let's be honest, I didn't recognize myself. Then I took out the notebook my brother had brought me and started writing. No, not complaints, facts, amounts, dates, doctor's statements, anything that might be useful. Because if anyone was going to get me out of this hole, it was myself. Only not the life jacket kind anymore, but the teeth clenched to the point of pain. I wrote down 6:42 a.m. Cardiac arrest, hospital, Mercy General. Resuscitation, 63 hours. Recovery, 8 days. Loss, everything, including a toothbrush. Remainder, dignity, so far. I finished, and yes, the next time I hear the word partnership, I'm going to ask what percentage you take away when my heart stops. Because in my case, the partner took it all, before I even woke up. And there I lay, without money, without an address, without clear plans, but with a surprisingly clear thought in my head. It's time to start again, but not from scratch, from understanding. I'm not just a guy who got screwed while he was on the ventilator. I'm walking proof that these days, kindness and loyalty turn into bank fees and resort bookings. The doctor on the ward came up with the final discharge papers. He looked at the papers and said, "Your heart has recovered nicely, but you will have to reconsider your lifestyle." I nodded, politely, though inwardly I wanted to ask, could I also reconsider the way I married? I signed the papers, put them in the bag, and looked at the bag. There were exactly 3 things in it: a phone charger, a t-shirt, and a notebook. The rest of my life fit into a free hospital bag. That's beautiful, almost poetic. Before I was discharged, the nurse came up to me, the one with the ponytail, handed me a paper cup of coffee and said, "You're going to be fine. You can see it in your eyes." And I said, "Just as long as you can see it in the bank account." We both smiled. And in that moment, I realized the first real human contact I'd had in days. I walked out of the hospital leaning on the handrail. Not because I was weak and I just wanted to linger. Before going forward again, before I became the one nobody was waiting for. But you know what I realized? I wasn't finished. They tried to erase me, and that's the interesting part. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. I thought getting out of the hospital would be the beginning. I was wrong. It was just the next level in a game called Live Without Instructions. In my pocket, $82 and a piece of discharge paper. Nothing behind my shoulders, nothing in the front either. When I walked up to the house Laura and I had lived in for almost 12 years, I knew right away. It wasn't mine anymore. The lock had been replaced, the new number on the mailbox, the flower pots I'd painted myself in the spring had been removed from the porch. The house stood clean, almost sterile. It was as if my existence had been etched out of it. I walked around the back of it. Through the neighbor's fence, I saw someone walking barefoot in the living room, now formerly the living room. A female figure, a different one. Not Laura, not my life, not my story. I sank down on the steps, my phone vibrating in my pocket. A message from the bank. Withdrawal $220. Card ends in 67. It was Laura, her second card, the one we had for household expenses, which I stupidly didn't disconnect. I dialed the bank. The girl on the line was polite, almost robotic. Said the card was still active because it was set up for sharing. I asked, And how do I close it? She said, you have to come to the branch with your passport. In the meantime, I'm sorry. Sorry, instantly, it became my favorite word of the week. It was everywhere. In the doctor's voice, on the phone, in my brother's eyes when he said, stay with us for now. There's not much room, but you're not proud. And I am, but without options. In the evening, I sat in their folding chair, the dog sleeping on the floor next to me, my niece looking at her tablet, Tim and his wife in the bedroom. I was in someone else's living room. No clothes, no plans, but with a stupid urge to open the door and yell, hey, somebody, is this even my life? The next day I went to legal aid. Free. For veterans. I brought everything I had. Statements, printouts, pictures of bank transactions. The guy behind the desk had thick-rimmed glasses, smelled of coffee and files. He looked through it all and said, you know, there's a chance. But get ready, it's long, it's messy, emotionally difficult. I asked if the deals could be invalidated. He nodded. Theoretically, yes. If we can prove that you were incapacitated at the time of the property transfer. I held out a piece of paper from the hospital, a doctor's report, coma, machine ventilation, signatures, seals. The lawyer nodded. This thing is our key. After the counseling session, I went outside. The cold air burned my lungs. Suddenly, there was a message, a wire transfer, $3,200, sender's name, Jane Holloway. I froze, not at the amount. The name. Jane and I hadn't spoken since I'd moved away. Back then, 3 years ago, it was almost a romance, almost a meeting, almost a confession. But I chose Laura, because marriage, because it's the right thing to do, because I had to. Now Jane sends money. No explanation, no questions. I didn't call. I just wrote, thank you. This is unexpected. I'm hanging in there. She wrote back an hour later. Call me if you need me. Don't disappear again. For the first time in a long time, I felt not anger, not despair, but a strange, quiet support. Unconditional. Meanwhile, the news continued to cheer. I received notice that Laura had filed for a counter-defense. In it, she stated that she was under emotional duress, that she could not cope alone, and that she had taken self-defense measures. I read this while looking at a picture from her resort. Cocktail in hand, palm trees in the background. Self-defense, yeah. From what? From her paralyzed husband? I wasn't angry, I was tired. Tired of the paperwork, the wording, of having someone else's words decide my fate. I went to the office of my old job. I met Brian, an old colleague. He was confused, but he gave me a hug. Shit, Garrett. We thought, well, you get it. I get it, I said. The office told me that my position was temporarily frozen, that everything would depend on the medical report, that we're always happy to help, but you understand. I understand. That's great. When you're on the horse, you're indispensable. Once you're off the saddle, it's your job to make way for the young ones. I came out of there and sat down on a bench. I was exhausted. The wind blew in my face, and I felt like an old tree without roots. I thought I was standing, but I couldn't hold on. The next day, I went over the paperwork. The lawyer gave me a list, copies of checks, proof of payments, treatment history, even a statement from a fitness app, anything that could show I wasn't sane at the time of the transaction. I gathered everything like a soldier piece by piece of equipment, because in the war for your name, there are no small things. And so I was sitting in my brother's kitchen when another message arrived, an electronic subpoena. The hearing was in a week. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from overwhelm, from the feeling that everything that was mine was now in question, even the right to be called a victim. And then something happened that I wasn't expecting. Not at all. As I sat in the kitchen going through my papers, the phone rang. The number was unrecognizable. I expected another call from the bank, maybe a lawyer. But the voice on the other end was not at all from that list. Garrett Spencer, this is Cindy Carter. I represent the real estate agency on your house. I froze. Your house was resold after the initial transaction. We've had some legal questions about the first phase of the sale. Could you please confirm that you personally signed the deed to the property? I exhaled. No, I said, because I was on an IV at the time, in intensive care, with tubes in my body. You want a certificate? I'll send you one. You want a picture? I even have selfies of me on the ventilator. The woman on the other end went silent. Then she said, we'll need to contact your representative. I'll leave my contacts. It might make a difference in the case. Thank you for your honesty. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in a while, I felt a slight tilt toward justice. Not for long, but it was noticeable. That same day, I got a call from Tim. His voice was strained. Garrett, you need to see this. He sent me a link to the video. Laura, the same one, interviewed on a YouTube show about inner transformation. In front of the villa, in white, glass in hand. She said, I decided to finally live for myself. My husband and I were too different. I wish him well, but my happiness is not in sacrifice, but in freedom. Sacrifice. So it turns out I was her anchor, a sick, broken husband who kept her from being herself. I watched that video all the way through. Not once did she mention where I was. Not one word about the hospital, about money, about possessions. Just a radiant, smiling version of a new life. In the comments, rapture. Such a strong woman. You are an inspiration. Quitting toxic is an act of strength. One user wrote, so glad you left. He would still be dragging you down. I didn't respond. I just turned off the screen and sat back down at my desk. The next day I got a call from my lawyer. We have a chance, he said. If we can prove that you were medically incapacitated at the time of the transfer, the deal can be undone. But it'll be a war. I'm ready, I said. I'm already in it. All I need is a gun. We got the paperwork together. We drew up a statement. We identified witnesses. The nurse on the ward agreed to confirm that no family had visited me. The doctor gave a signed statement. My brother gave a copy of correspondence where I couldn't respond. Everything was ready to go, but I wasn't. The same hole still sat inside. The one where the feeling of home, of marriage, of trust had flown away. I no longer knew who I could say, I feel bad to, without hearing back. It's your own fault. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my notebook and wrote, I don't want revenge. I want the truth to breathe. I want it to be heard. And if I have to go to trial to do that, I'll go. Just before the hearing, I went for a walk. Just a walk. My fingers were freezing in my pockets. My shoes were rubbing my heels. But I walked because I needed to remind myself of who I am. Not a number on a report. Not a signature at the bottom of a lawsuit. Not the name on the paperwork. I'm the survivor, the one who was eliminated, and someone who decided to come back. Not for revenge, so that no one else would think that a sick person could be replaced by a reservation at a resort hotel. And I took a step toward the courtroom, not to judge, but to put a stop to it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No marble, no pathos, just carpeting, tables, 3 rows of benches, and a flag in the corner. But everything inside clenched like I'd walked into the Colosseum. On one side was me. On the other, the woman I once built a house with and picked out a name for the baby we never had. Now there are files, lawyers, and business-sized hatred between us. Laura sat in a white blouse, with a facial expression I remembered from her corporate photo shoots, confidence tinged with boredom. Next to her was her lawyer, in an expensive suit with a clipboard on his desk. I was in my brother's dark jacket and carrying a folder I was picking up piece by piece, like a rough draft of life. The judge walked in. We stood up. He looked tired, like he'd heard it all a dozen times before, and probably had heard it all. The betrayals, the lawsuits, the stares across the room. Except it wasn't a story to us. It was a single scene. Her side was the first to speak. The lawyer began by saying, Your Honor, this case is not about malice. It's about the survival of a woman abandoned in an emotionally destructive marriage. I almost laughed. If it weren't for the fact that it was about me, I would have thought they were putting on a play. He continued, My client took steps to ensure her own safety and financial stability at a time when her spouse was unfortunately incapacitated. And he added, All actions were taken within the law, with legal advice. When it was my lawyer's turn, he stood up, straightened his papers, and began. Dear court, we are not discussing moral grayness. We are talking about legal black and white. At the time of the transfer of all assets, our client was in intensive care. The confirmation is here. Signatures are here. The medical report is in the file. His assets were withdrawn without his consent, in violation of the law. The judge listened without interrupting, but his eyes were darting from me to her, from words to documents. I sat as if on the bench, not having the right to interfere in the match of my life. In the middle of the hearing, they invited witnesses. The first was a nurse from the hospital. She quietly but confidently confirmed the patient was in a medically induced coma. He could not make decisions or sign documents. The second was Laura's neighbor, who suddenly stated that she never saw him come back after he was discharged. And Lori, she said he was gone for good. That's it. It turns out, was gone. For good. Without a suitcase, without a letter, without legs. Then they gave me the floor. I stood up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was anger hidden under a layer of politeness. Your Honor, I began. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a public figure. I'm just a man who trusted. Trusted my wife when I went into surgery. I trusted her when I went into a coma. I trusted that when I woke up, I would at least return to the same life I had before the tubes and monitors. But I woke up to nothing. She was gone. Taken everything. Didn't say a word. I pulled out a copy of a bank notice from my time at ICU. Your Honor, this one says account closed. This one here says the sale of the house. Right here, a change of beneficiary on the insurance policy. All without my knowledge. All during a time when I couldn't even speak. I'm sorry, but if that's not a violation, then we're all at risk. The judge looked at me closely. At one point, he even took off his glasses. Laura's lawyer was quickly writing something down, but she didn't look up. The hearing went on for 2 hours. Then silence. The judge went into conference. We waited. I drank water that seemed murky. My heart was pounding louder than the air conditioner. The verdict was not instantaneous. The judge asked for time to review additional materials. But already that day, he'd issued a tentative ruling. Freeze the balances, stop the resale of the property, and request a full medical report. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. The court had invalidated Laura's actions. The sale of the house was canceled. The accounts were returned to my control. Everything she'd done was declared illegal because she was incapacitated. I was sitting on a bench outside the courthouse. People were walking by. No one knew it wasn't just a day for me. It was a point of reference. Not for winning, for a comeback. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I just quietly called my brother and said, "She lost." He replied, "No, Garrett, you just finally got your name back." A few days went by. I went back to that very house, not to live, to feel. The keys, of course, had to be obtained through the courts. The door creaked open, as if surprised to see me. Inside it was empty. Not a single thing, not a single book, not the smell of coffee in the morning, which I loved. Just dust, and a faint trace of the rug where our couch had once stood. I walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer. There was my old notebook. The pages are crumpled, but the handwriting is familiar. Prescriptions, passwords, and on the last page, a short inscription I'd made the day before the surgery. If anything goes wrong, know that I was still happy with you. I reread those lines and felt not anger moving inside. No, emptiness, understanding, time that can't be taken back, and trust that can't be rebuilt. I sold the house, not for the money, for completion. I bought a small apartment by the lake. It smelled damp, but it was my smell, honest, unfiltered. I took a job as a counselor at one of the Veterans Foundations. I listened to others, helped. Sometimes told my story, but no names, no accusations, just conclusions. And one evening, as the sun was falling on the water, I got a letter from Laura. No attachments, no claims. Just 3 lines. I didn't expect you to come up. I thought you'd break. I'm sorry I was wrong. I didn't respond, because I was no longer someone who needed her approval. I now knew the value of silence, of solitude, of justice. And it was in that silence that I found what she could never take away: myself. As the years passed, the memories faded, but the lesson remained. Never trust someone who smiles when you're in a coma. Never hand the keys to your life to those who already have a suitcase behind their back. I started writing articles for veteran publications, not about the war, about surviving in a post-war world. And one day I got an invitation to speak. The topic: trust and recovery. I went up on stage, looked into the audience, and I saw no judgment in the faces. There were people like me there, those who had lost, those who had stood up, those who now knew that survival isn't just about the body, it's about the soul. I ended my speech by saying, they can take your money, your house, even your last name, but there's one thing they can't take without your permission: your truth. The applause was muted, but it was real. After that, I went home, to my humble apartment. I made coffee. I opened the window, and I realized for the first time in months it didn't hurt to breathe. You know why? Because when you're betrayed, you lose everything. But when you get yourself back, you get more than they could have stolen from you. Then I made a habit. Every morning before work, I'd go out to the lake and stand in complete silence. No phone, no thoughts, just the wind and the water, people walking by, some with dogs, some with coffee. And I stood there as if I were guarding something. Myself. A new version of myself. Not the one that used to be Laura's husband. The one that had survived everything and hadn't broken. And one of those days, I noticed a man in his 60s. He came over, stopped next to me. He didn't say a word. And then he said, "I read you. You were right. I survived too." And we stood side by side like two strangers, bound by silence. No words were needed, because sometimes the truth is the quietest. I've since realized the power isn't in regaining what's lost. Strength is in not losing yourself, even when you've been zeroed in on. And if you're reading this, if you've been through betrayal too, remember, they can steal everything. But as long as you're alive, you still have you. And that's all that matters.